The level of hate directed at Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz from the right is very revealing of how Republicans, specifically those who are part of the Trump campaign, understand the concept of masculinity. Because on paper, his political opinions aside, Tim Walz seems like their kind of guy, doesn't he? He's an older, cisgender, heterosexual white man. He's married with kids. He was a football coach. He's a hunter. He served in the National Guard for over 20 years. Aren't those all things conservatives love? Aren't those the sorts of things men are supposed to be and do? Obviously, Walz is a Democrat, and he's on the ticket running against their beloved God King Donald Trump, so Republicans attacking him isn't unexpected. But they could easily attack Walz for his political positions, for his voting record while he was a member of Congress, for the policies he's enacted during his tenure as the governor of Minnesota. He signed bills protecting the rights of LGBTQ people and making breakfast and lunch free for public school students, being nice to gay and trans people and feeding children. Republicans hate that. And they are attacking Walz about those things, bigoted, nihilistic ghouls that they are, but they're also attacking him as a man. They're saying things like, Tim Walz is the kind of man the Democrats want to turn all men into. Here's one example of what I'm talking about from Twitter. A photo of Tim Walz at a rally with the description, quote, "He is quite literally the sum of every white male in modern commercials. Always the fool, subordinate role, fat dad, bumbling customer, ignorant questioner, cynical inquirer, fool, subordinate, fat, bumbling, ignorant, cynical." This is how they see Tim Walz. And this is how they want everyone else to see him too. I look at Tim Walz and I try to see what they're seeing, what they're telling me I should see, and I just can't see it. What about Tim Walz is foolish? Is it that he seems to be having fun? Is it that he sometimes makes jokes at his own expense? Self-deprecating humor is a real problem for Trump and his supporters, I've noticed. The idea of making fun of yourself is unthinkable to them. They don't understand it. Make fun of myself, but that would make me look weak. I must always project strength, for only then will I command respect. Trump looks at someone making a self-deprecating joke the same way he looks at the tombstone of a soldier who threw themselves on a grenade to save their comrades. He thinks, that's dumb. Why would anyone do that? Walz is the vice presidential candidate. So why is it a problem that he's subordinate to someone? That's literally his role on the ticket. Is J.D. Vance a weak man in their eyes because he is subordinate to Donald Trump? Of course not. J.D. Vance is a weak man in their eyes because he uses a liner pencil around his eyes, but they try not to think about that. Why is it an issue for Walz but not for Vance, aside from plain old right-wing hypocrisy, which I'm sure accounts for some of it? Because it's not an issue for Republicans when a man runs to be the vice president of another man. It's only an issue when a man runs to be the vice president of a woman. Not just a woman either, a successful, confident woman of color who takes no shit, willingly choosing to support that woman and enthusiastically at that, standing behind her instead of in front of her. What self-respecting man would do that? Can't he see that she's That tweet calls him a fat dad. And first of all, it's a little out of date. Tim looks like he's dropped some weight recently. Not that he had to. He was fine the way he was, but now he's looking trim and fighting fit. But that's really beside the point. So what if he is a fat dad? What's wrong with that? Do conservatives not love their fat dads? Do conservatives not respect their fat dads? Do conservatives look at their fat dads and shake their heads ruefully and say, "You're what's wrong with this country. My God, you look like a man in a modern commercial"? What about Tim Walz-Reed's bumbling customer? What about Tim Walz-Reed's bumbling period? If anything, judging by his social media history from the last few years, he gives off the vibe of an affable but highly competent guy. He doesn't seem bumbling to me. He seems like the guy I'd ask for help if my car wouldn't start, because I'd just assume by looking at him that he'd be able to fix it. He seems like the kind of guy who would know off the top of his head the safest, most effective, and most humane way to remove a groundhog that's living under your porch. He seems like the kind of guy to whom you could casually mention that the heating element in your oven went bad, and before the end of the conversation, he's already gotten on his phone and ordered you a replacement element because he remembers the exact make and model of your oven from the one time he visited your house, and offers to install it for you when it arrives and says you can just reimburse him for the cost of the part whenever you've got the money. No rush. Tim Walz is that guy. When I hear the phrase bumbling customer, the person I'm picturing looks a lot more like this guy, who apparently still believes you need to show ID to buy groceries. Speaking of showing ID to buy groceries, I don't think Tim Walz is the kind of guy who would pay for his groceries with a check. But if he did, he'd already have written the check ahead of time, so all he had to do when he got up to the register was fill in the amount, and he'd have his ID out and ready before the cashier even asked for it. Tim Walz is the only person who, if he was in line ahead of me at the grocery store and I saw him paying by check, I wouldn't get annoyed. I'd know he'd be out of there faster paying by check than I would be paying with my card, because that's who Tim Walz is. Ignorant questioner is an interesting one. Isn't anyone who asks a good faith question they don't know the answer to, by definition, ignorant? Isn't that why you're asking the question? What does the twit who tweeted this mean by ignorant questioner? Someone who asks a question that they should know the answer to? Or that they should know better than to ask? Like someone who goes to a Springsteen concert and asks his buddies, "Do you think he'll play Jack and Diane?" I don't think Tim Walz would make that mistake. And finally, cynical inquirer. So Tim Walz is both an ignorant questioner and a cynical inquirer? Can you be both of those at the same time? He shows up at the Springsteen concert and asks if he'll play Jack and Diane, which makes him ignorant, and he also bitterly assumes that Springsteen won't play it, which makes him cynical? Maybe? I don't know. A cynical inquirer sounds like someone who is asking a question they already know the answer to, and they're asking the question for some selfish or underhanded purpose, to try and manipulate the person they're asking, or steer the conversation in a particular direction. Or perhaps a cynical inquirer is someone who asks a question not necessarily knowing what the answer will be, but expecting that the answer won't be pleasing to them. That's usually what we mean when we describe someone as cynical. They expect the worst. They assume the worst about people. They lack faith in others. Does that sound like Tim Walz to you? It doesn't to me. Then again, this is nothing new. When conservatives describe their progressive opponents, they often descend into bleak dystopian fantasies. In the common right-wing telling of the story, Joe Biden is an ardent communist, as was Barack Obama, as is Kamala Harris, even though most people actually on the left consider all three to be fairly centrist, left-leaning at best. So why wouldn't they attempt to turn a neighborly, good-natured, all-around solid guy like Tim Walz into a self-abasing, blundering avatar of derogated modern manliness? It's what they do. The fact that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and their surrogates and their pathetic volunteer water carriers like the doofus who posted the tweet I've been referring to are so keen to attack Tim Walz for the kind of man he is says to me that they're threatened by the kind of man he is, which also tells me what weak and fragile men they are, because can you imagine a less threatening person than Tim Walz? What is it about him they feel so threatened by? Obviously, he's progressive. He has a record of trying to turn the power of government to the benefit of people who actually need a hand up, rather than people who already have more than they will ever need. Is it deeper than that? I think it might be. Remember what I said at the beginning. Walz is many things that right-wing men typically regard as manly. A husband, a father, a coach, a hunter. But you know what else? From all outward indications, Tim Walz is? He's happy. He's joyful. He's not grudgingly getting in line behind Kamala Harris because the party drafted him. He's enthusiastic. He's exuberant. He wants to be her vice president. So much of the right-wing concept of masculinity centers on how miserable it is to be a man. The weight of responsibility a man carries, the thanklessness supposedly inherent to traditional male roles, the necessity to always project strength and confidence, to never ask for help, to keep your feelings contained within yourself, the requirement to dominate everyone in every situation. It sounds fucking exhausting. But there's Tim Walz. He doesn't seem exhausted. He seems energized. He's not miserable. He's not angry. At least he's not angry at the things they're angry about. He's thriving. He's confident. He's humble. He owns himself. He speaks to crowds that regularly number in the thousands, and he makes it look easy, and people love him for it. He receives the kind of respect men on the right have been told their whole lives they need to demand, to extract. People just willingly give that respect to Tim Walz, because he isn't a bigoted, perpetually aggrieved, emotionally stunted weirdo. Because people actually like him. Happy, respected, liked. No wonder men on the right are so desperate to tear Tim Walz down. He's everything they'll never be.